As the Monday deadline approaches over Iran's nuclear program, the U.S. and its allies are trying to hold their ground against Tehran in their wish to extend the time frame for a deal. Joining us to discuss is the Heritage Foundation's Nile Gardiner. Welcome, Nile. We have
it's a pleasure to be here.
Deadline coming up on Monday. We have John Kerry in Vienna trying to push this deal through with the P5+1. Last week we found out that President Obama had sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader, again trying to push this deal through. I mean, it looks like the White House wants this to happen.
I do think the White House is desperate for some kind of deal with Iran, but there is a huge amount of concern, of course, on Capitol Hill with regard to the Obama administration's intentions to cut this kind of deal, which could be very damaging, frankly, to U.S. interests. So I think there's a real fear here that John Kerry is going to sign an agreement with Iran that is going to undercut the U.S. sanctions strategy against the Iranians, which has been having some effect, it has to be said, on their economy. And for various political reasons, it appears the Obama administration is going to strike some kind of deal with Tehran, which, frankly, my view is will not actually halt Iran's nuclear weapons program. So I think it's going to be a very interesting 2 or 3 days ahead of us, but a very dangerous time, I think, in terms of U.S. interests and also, of course, the future of the broader Middle East as well.
And the buzz this morning is that there actually will be some sort of extension. I mean, with your policy background and being in Washington, what are you hearing? A, will there be an extension in your point of view? And B, what will this mean for a deal? Are we actually just surrendering to what will inevitably be a nuclear-armed Iran?
Well, hearing a number of things, actually. Firstly, here in Washington, undoubtedly, the White House is pressing very hard for a deal on Monday. And I think John Kerry is trying his hardest to get some kind of deal. However, signals coming from London suggest that a deal may not be possible. And I think that the British Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, has indicated it's going to be very hard to actually strike a deal with Tehran. So I think you're having mixed messages here. But we can be in no doubt that President Obama wants to strike a deal which would actually ease the sanctions on Iran. And after all, President Obama has opposed many of the toughest sanctions being levied by Congress. This deal, in effect, actually, would simply buy Iran more time, actually, to develop its nuclear program. It would perhaps reduce the number of centrifuges, but it would not actually in any way limit Iran's long-term capability to pursue its nuclear program, which many believe is a nuclear weapons program. And certainly the Israelis are deeply concerned about what's happening here, not least because Iran has, on a number of occasions, and even as recently as last week, threatened to wipe Israel off the map. So we know what Iran's intentions are, and this is a brutal regime that is, in my view, hell-bent on pursuing a nuclear weapons program for aggressive purposes in the Middle East.
I had a chance to sit down with Senator Mark Kirk of Illinois this week, who had this warning about the Iran nuclear deal going forward. My biggest fear is that the president's condemning the next generation of Americans to witnessing a nuclear war in the Middle East, which he should not pass on to his successors. We should make sure we execute policies so that Americans never have to witness that. This administration is a pacifist administration, and it really hasn't learned any of the lessons that the greatest generation painfully learned in the late 1930s. This generation thinks by sheer force of its personality, it can make people like them more. The reality is that the Iranian government has hated the American government for a long time. Nile, it appears that there's obviously bipartisan support for what Senator Kirk has put forward, and he has pushed for sanctions against Iran, the same sentiments that you just echoed a minute ago, that we have to keep their feet to the fire, that we have to keep the pressure on them. What are your thoughts on what will happen with regard to the lawmakers in this country and trying to stop the president from pushing this deal forward?
Well, I think that if President Obama goes ahead and strikes a deal with Tehran next week, through his representative John Kerry, there will be outrage on Capitol Hill. And I think that Senator Kirk's sentiments are absolutely spot on. The Obama administration has been pursuing a policy of appeasement towards Tehran. This is an extremely dangerous policy. The president hasn't learnt the lessons of history. You're dealing here with a regime in Tehran that is a genocidal regime. It has already pledged to wipe a close neighbor, Israel, off the map. It also threatens Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and a number of US allies in the region, all of whom are against any kind of nuclear deal. And so I do think that Senator Kirk is absolutely right when he warns that this deal will be unacceptable to the United States Congress, will be unacceptable as well to the American people, will be unacceptable to US allies in the region. This is a no-win situation for the United States here. And this is what happens when you pursue policies that are fundamentally weak. And the Obama administration has pursued an overall approach towards Tehran that really treats Iran as though it's some sort of normal negotiating power. It's not. It's a dangerous Islamist regime that is certainly set upon building a nuclear weapons program. That's the only reason why it's developing nuclear weapons, nuclear facilities, whatever the message Tehran is sending. You simply cannot trust Tehran here. And therefore, any kind of deal that President Obama and John Kerry reach with Iran this coming week, I think is going to hugely disappoint members of Congress and will lead to widespread condemnation on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely. And it's important to mention also the people of Iran, over 1,000 executions over the last year and a half, and also the 2 Americans still being held in Iranian prisons. Thank you, Nile, for your time.
My pleasure, Lisa. Thank you.